Join Prater in the Bowl Game Friday at X Golf Boise. We'll be celebrating their first-year anniversary. Great food, drink specials, plus all the basketball you can watch while playing any of over 50 courses. Those are available at X Golf, Prater. We're excited to be there on Friday, watching the big dance, doing our thing, Prater.
Yes, sir.
And here we go, man. Boise State spring injury report. They sent this email or this text message to us. The sports information department did the other day, and whoa, had to keep on scrolling. There's a lot of players on this Boise State roster, Prater, that will be not even limited in most cases. They're out.
Yeah, 18 different players, and they're almost all out, except for maybe one or two that might be able to do some things on the back end. They didn't even include Madsen on this list.
He wasn't.
He was not on this list. So, I mean, this is guys that are literally seriously out for the entire spring ball for a variety of reasons. And the coaches warned us that the list was going to come out. They were going to make it public, and they told us that it was going to be very, very, very long. But 18 different players. That's 8 on offense, 9 on defense, and 1 special teams player. Are going to be out for spring ball. That's too many. And I kept having flashbacks, and I don't mean to make this back to my football team, but the University of Utah was going into the 2023 football season. And this really didn't have anything to do with spring ball or being overly cautious. But when they played their season opener of what was told a very promising football team and a very promising season and high expectations, they had 8 starters out on the season opening game. The season opening game, they had 8 starters out. And I kept thinking, there's no way that this is going to get better once the season starts, because these things manifest and grow. And the next thing you know, injuries in October and November and December are the number one storyline with your football team. And that scares me. And that's the number one killer of a football team is injuries. And when you have 18 players completely out in spring ball, and when we were at practice the other day, and about halfway through spring ball, the opening day of spring ball, they let all the rehab guys in, and they just kept coming and coming and coming around the corner and more and more. And I kept trying to write them all down. And there was so many of them I couldn't do it. And then Friday afternoon, while we were on the air, they put out this list of all 17 or all 18 of these players. So I'm not so much worried about the offensive side. We can tell you the 8 on offense. There really isn't anybody on offense except for maybe Carry On, the interior offensive lineman who can play guard and center. Everybody else, I don't really care about. Defensively, I've got some issues with some names that are missing on defense. There's some serious big names here. And then the kicker punter, Reeser, the San Diego State transfer is out too, but I don't need to see him for at least a couple of years.
Let's start on the defense. And I think that obviously the big names you're talking about, again, these guys will not participate any way whatsoever, participate in spring practice. Prater, I think the defensive guys you're talking about, 3 big-time starters, Ahmed Hassanin, Marco Notarini, and Shea Oladipo. How scary is this not playing spring?
Yeah, I'm more worried about just the front. I mean, there's 5 defensive linemen that are out, and all of them are expected to be contributors at one point or another. Callahan, Steege, J.J. Tallow, who is limited, but and certainly the least experienced of the group. But and then there's Hassanin and Weegis. Those are all defensive linemen, defensive tackles or defensive ends that are out. So of the 9 defensive players, 5 of them are right up front. And we know that how important that up front interior is. And they're pretty deep across the front, if you ask me, especially at the nose tackle position. So there is no real cause for concern here, but certainly the red flag, you put that sucker up, 5 defensive front guys. And that is very scary. Then the 2 linebackers you mentioned, Marco Notriani and Misa. The Misa kid has never really developed.
Jeez,
I'm not too much worried about that. And Marco's that's an issue from last year. And then Oladipo certainly is going to be an issue. Although they're very deep at nickel, they're very deep at safety. So maybe there's some room there for some young kids to grow. And then a cornerback, a new kid, this Williams kid as well. So those are your 9 defensive players. And again, the front 7 with Notriani and maybe those defensive linemen up front, that's scary to me. Hopefully they can get some players that get some experience and this turns into a positive.
Yeah, I mean, sure. And by August, when training camp begins, fall camp begins, they are absolutely 100%. And missing a spring doesn't have effect. You just kind of don't know now. Now, there'd be guys you'd like to be out there. Cameron Camper, the wide receiver from Indiana. And I know from an experience standpoint, I get it. He's had, I think, 1,000-yard season in the Big Ten. He's got experience, but just from, being a member of the team and everything else. I wish he was going to play in spring. No Cam Camper, the receiver that people have.
He was expected though, because he had an ACL last year. He's not even a given for fall camp.
He's not even a given for fall camp.
No, I would. Anything you get out of Cam Camper in the 2024 calendar year is going to be extra gravy. So I wouldn't put a lot of expectations, especially with a deep wide receiver room and a guy who has very, very, very serious injury history issues. Cam Camper was never expected to be involved in the spring, full on ACL. We'll see what happens in the fall, but I think his better days are ahead, and the expectations to see him right now probably should be pretty low.
What about tight end? Caden Anderson, Caden Dawson, spelled differently, both tight ends though, and Austin Terry, another tight end. Prater, 3 tight ends out for spring ball. I mean, there's a position there outside of Matt Lauder. Doesn't have a lot of experience in game. I mean, 12 personnel. Everybody likes to run that this year where you have multiple tight ends on the field at the same time. I don't know if Nate Potter was hoping, I would think, to be able to develop at least one, maybe 2 of these players, and Anderson, Dawson, or Terry, to get them in some type of tight end rotation next year. You think that's a big deal? No tight ends? Or at least these 3 tight ends won't be participating in the spring when they come back next week?
No, it's not a big deal for me in the spring. I mean, if they're all 3 not available in the fall, and again, we don't know specific injuries for most of these guys, but with Matt Lauder supposed to doing a majority of the work, as long as he's healthy, I'm okay with that, because I think that dude still needs some serious development. So I don't need him to sit while everybody develops behind him. I want Matt Lauder to be the tight end superstar in spring and fall. But yeah, you're right. Building the depth behind there, and there's 7 or 8 tight ends on this roster. 3 of them are out in the spring, and all 3 of them could use certainly a spring to get taken care of. But as long as they're there in the fall, and as long as they're still playing backup roles, I'm not too much worried about the tight end spot.
What do you guys think? Are you guys worried, or this no big deal whatsoever for you? Boise State's spring injury report. These players we're mentioning are not playing in spring football, and there's a lot of them on here. 8 offensive players, 9 defensive players, and 1 special teams kind of kicker/punter, the Jarrett Reeser kid who transferred from San Diego State. 208-424-9300 on the Double Tap Pub hotline. Prater, a couple other names I wanted to throw your way. Michael Callahan, a 6th-year senior. I think you kind of threw him in and lumped him in with the defensive line, but there's a guy who played a lot of snaps last year. He's a 6th-year guy. He won't be available spring, and that guy's been through the rigors of spring ball. This will be probably his 5th spring ball, 6th spring ball, so probably doesn't need it as much, maybe from a leadership standpoint on there. And other than that, some backups there. Tyler Crow's not going to play at all in the spring, but he will be back. Another running back, Zamondre Merriweather. I'm sorry, he's a receiver. Ethan Makita is the running back that's out for the entire spring ball as well. But yeah, it's a pretty long list, Prater.
My biggest one is Ahmed Hassanin. The fact that he won't be able to participate at all this spring. As good as that guy is, he's 60% good. And he needs every stinking rep he possibly can. He's supposed to be a captain on this team, and this doesn't mean he can't be. Yeah. We'll see how it plays out. But I'm not sure what's going on there with that injury, how serious it is, why it's happening. Ahmed Hassanin certainly needs to be out there in the spring. I need to see him get some reps, but hopefully, as long as he's 100, I can't wait to talk to Spencer the next time we get him. And the football team is on spring break this week, guys, and they'll resume fall camp, spring camp again next week. But they're on spring break all this week. But as soon as we get Spencer, I kind of want to figure out how much of these guys are targeted for fall in terms of 100% to see what that is.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about the linebacker depth too, and just to expand a little bit, I mean, if Deshaun Misa, the kid from Eastside Catholic, Seattle area, and at the time one of the bigger, more reputable defensive recruits that this program had ever signed, he just hasn't been able to find the field much. You were thinking maybe this would be an opportunity for him to climb some depth on those charts on spring ball. Deshaun Misa not going to be available for the entire spring camp. Who knows? Maybe there's a player or two that is going to look at the portal after camp on this list. You just never know these days, Prater, who you're going to win, who you're going to lose. And Boise State, Spencer Danielson. And it's funny how you said, because you're right. You'll go to practice and you watch practice, And you just, you're not ever saying, oh, geez, where's Caden Dawson, Prater? I don't know. Where's Caden Anderson either? You just don't notice. You could think maybe, it looks a little light. But then at the end of practice, they let them all in. And then there's just a bunch of dudes who walk in with jerseys on or whatever it is, the rehab guys, the guys who are hurt, because during practice, they're in the treatment facility. They're in the Blameyer rehabbing. And then they all walk in at the end of practice. And you're like, wow, okay. There's a lot of guys right there walking in, but they're cleaning some stuff up. And there it is. 8 offensive, 9 defense, in 1 special teams. When do they get back at it, Prater? Next week?
Yep.
Prater on the ball game, KTIK, the ticket. JP, let's get an update on Alexander Madison and his new home. Plus, former Boise State receiver Cedric Wilson. He talks about signing with the New Orleans Saints. We'll bring you that audio as well. We're Prater on the ball game. This is Idaho Sports Talk on KTIK, the ticket. Appreciate our video audience. That's always brought to you by the Dollar Loan Center. They've been funding loans here in Idaho at don'tbebroke.com. They got 16 locations coming soon. Again, don'tbebroke.com for the Dollar Loan Center. JP, let's get to the news.
This is Idaho Sports Talk with Prater in the Ballgame on 95.